And I can now officially welcome everyone again. I am Konstantinos Dimopoulos, and with me are George, Verena, and Jonas. And we will be discussing writing in games and specifically writing for. Sorry, I'm still admitting people inside. So, specifically writing about the Talos Principle games and Serious Sum 4, and perhaps even a touch of Land of Dreams. Now, me and
Indeed.
Georgos are here representing D6 Learning, which is a new international online, at least mostly online school on game development and programming and IT and web. And yes, we would like you to have a look at our socials and perhaps drop by, see the stuff that we have prepared. And Jonas and Verena Kyratzes, on the other hand, are not working in the school. They're friends of ours, and they are the people who have who have written a variety of pretty excellent games, such as Talos Principle, the Talos Principle II, the forthcoming um, remaster of the original Talos Principle, and it is a remaster, right?
And an extension, kind of.
And an extension, good. So the Talos Principle reawakened, and also the Lands of Dreams games, which I will get to discussing any chance I get. So the whole idea is that I will be asking some questions, and I will be monitoring the chat and taking a look at stuff that you might actually want to ask, and I will be passing on the questions to Jonas and Verena. Please keep your cameras off, and please keep yourselves muted, and all the questions should be directed through the chat. And having said that, Jonas and Verena, thank you for being here, and again, welcome. It's always lovely to see you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Of course,
thank you.
I obviously love having you here. And I don't know, would you like to introduce yourselves? I mean, I just said a few things like Verena and Jonas, like what is it that you mainly do, and what is it that you would love to do instead?
We're hi. We're both writers. We work in the video game industry, like you said. Worked in all those games. I've been making indie games for a very, very long time. I started more than 20 years ago. Verena has been often working with me, collaborating on stuff almost since the beginning, not quite since then. And yeah, we occasionally do other stuff as well, work in other fields on occasion. We did a children's book, as you may remember, in Greek.
I might, yeah, I
You might
might.
remember that. We did Gospels. I did Gospels of the Flood, a podcast, an audio drama. What we would like to be doing, um, I would like to work more as in addition to, not instead of, to do stuff like television or something like that, serialized storytelling. I love working with actors. Although what I really might want to do the most of all is overthrow the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, but
Uh,
this isn't like work.
yeah, okay,
Well,
it's
it's a
more a
lot of
hobby.
work,
It's a
sort
it's,
of.
it's
It
a
is a lot
hobby.
of
Yeah,
work.
it's a
Yeah,
hobby.
it's a lot of work. It's a hobby,
Um,
but it's mainly a hobby.
yeah, Rena.
I mean, you already beautifully introduced me. So everything that he said. If if in a perfect world, I would be a novelist. I mean, still writing, but less digital, more books. That's
Yes,
it.
it's like you'd rather go for the less interactive writing. Actually, both of you.
I mean, in addition to, it's not
Yeah.
In addition
instead
to.
of, right? There's different kinds of writing that's enjoyable. We've done a
Mhm.
lot of interactive writing, and that is a very interesting avenue, and it is important to us. It's just not the only thing, right? I think both of us are. I mean, both of us are drawn to doing different types of things. So it's not where one is necessarily better, but we've done a lot of one, and it'd be interesting to do a bit more of some of the others.
And
Hey,
true.
Gordita. Hi. Uh, uh, yeah. That's
Okay,
that's
so
that's basically it. Yeah.
since you actually started with that, I would like before actually discussing any specific games, um, could any of you or both of you care to sort of highlight the differences between, let's say, more traditional, less interactive, more linear writing as opposed to writing for video games or doing the narrative design for a video game? Like, how is it different in the way that you approach it, or is it the same perhaps?
Quick, say something intelligent.
Okay. I would say it's very different in some ways. It's very differently structured, so it tends to be much more a series of nodes of text that interconnect in a very complicated kind of web than it is one long piece of text, and it just has to take into account that there's a player, so it's being experienced in a very different way, often in different orders, and you have to account for that, and you have to make use of that. I think the important thing is when you're writing a game is that you're not trying to fit a movie into game format or a book into game format. You're writing for the interactive format. But of course, in other ways, it's the same. You're still trying to write a good sentence, good dialogue, good characters. You still have the same. You still want to achieve the same literary depth and other things that you would try to achieve in any other form. But the structure in which you're doing this and the way in which it functions and the way in which the story could deviate and all these things, that's very different. Like, it's a big challenge, for example, in a game like Talos, where the player can make a lot of decisions and push characters in different directions, especially in Talos 2, where you can have very different outcomes. You have to write a version of the story that's not necessarily the one you want to happen. Like, that's not what you don't want it to turn out that way, but you still have to account for that, have to make that work, give it some dignity.
And now that Jonas did say this actually very intelligent piece of dialogue,
I can depend on him to say the intelligent things. Then I can say things like, oh, he hates when I say this. I consider myself a writer who works in video games and not a video game writer, and which sounds incredibly deep. But what I really mean is that I kind of just approach all writing the same. I mean, like Jonas said, there's obviously different demands from the medium, but otherwise you just put the same amount of care into it.
Yeah.
And I would like to ask you, for example, I'm thinking of Verena's latest short story, the one that was
the one that I wrote 15 years ago.
Not 15, it was like 3. Not the the one with the gods.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Was that in any way?
8 years ago.
It was not. Stop.
True.
No, it was less. It was like
okay.
6
anyway, yes.
Go on. Don't
do that.
Sorry.
Was it in any way like influenced by your work in video games? Was it like? Did you have any different insights or any different ideas that have to do with you working in video games as a writer?
Wait, are we still talking about my short story?
Yes.
Okay. With that one, no, that was just such a fever dream. I sound like the most naive person on the planet when I say that what happened with that story is that I literally dreamt it and then I woke up.
Okay.
And I wrote the entire thing in about 2.5 hours and then I never touched it again. And that has never happened to me with any piece of writing that I've written in my life. So it was just wake up, first draft done by 11 in the morning, and then that was it. I would dearly love for that to happen again, but sadly, so far, no luck.
Hold on, I'll just actually post that.
This is something that I didn't expect as an answer.
I know, and I hate when I say it because it sounds so like, oh no, it all came to me in a dream, but it did.
I think we just posted the same thing.
Okay. Good for us.
Well, you can read it twice now.
Nice.
So when was it published?
4 years ago, 5 years ago now.
Good. That's much closer to what I felt. It's like I tend to think that
it's because we're old. It's because we're old, and now time is passing
I will not
quickly.
Get back into this horrible discussion. Jonas is actually dying in slow motion for your entertainment. And since we're on the non-interactive writing front, a few words on Gospel of the Floods, which is one of the things that Verena did not work on, but Jonas did work on, and Chris, who I actually think I saw somewhere in this Zoom did the sound and music for. And it's probably my favorite podcast, my favorite audio drama ever. And I don't know, Jonas, would you have anything interesting or clever, as Verena would suggest, to say about Gospel of the Floods besides, listen to it?
Yeah, listen to it. I mean, it's
It's
probably my
pithy.
favorite project I've ever done. Certainly very, very high up in my top 3 or something like that. And it's a 7-episode limited series about a priest who has lost his faith and is trying to kind of reconnect with it and with people he knew while the world sinks under the sea inexplicably. It's the main actor is Peter Wingfield, whom I've adored my entire life, and now luckily get to work with every now and then, including on Talos 2. And the music and sound is by Chris Christodoulou, our common friend and one of the most talented people I know. And it's one of the few things I've ever done where the execution is identical to the intent. So it's exactly everything that I thought it would be. It's exactly that with almost no deviations. And it was an incredible project. And yeah, it's kind of a passion project. You can listen to it for free. It has no advertising, no nothing. And yeah, it's a special little thing.
And
Not
in
very
reality,
mainstream, unfortunately.
yeah, but still, it's
Um,
something that everyone who gets exposed to tends to become an evangelist and start talking about it to other people, which is, it's like the actual word of mouth doing its thing, albeit
yeah,
very,
yeah,
very
that's mostly
slowly.
how people find out about it, word of mouth.
And Catherine asks whether there are any other projects like Gospels in the works.
Yes, we're working with Chris on a kind of Lovecraftian noir New York 1970s dirty cop story with cosmic horror. We recorded the main chunk of it in LA last year with 3 wonderful leads, and have since been recording bits and pieces with other people because it's very, very complicated. It'll have 10 episodes. We're editing it now, basically, so it's still in production, and hopefully it'll actually have more than one season. It's very ambitious. I think it's a fun project. It has a lot of interesting ideas in it. It's just yeah, it's a lot of work for us, so it takes a while to get it done. We've been working on it for quite a while because it just it's so much to do. Like Gospels had one main kind of actor and then 4 other actors doing parts in the intros here and there, which they were great, but that wasn't that much work. This one has like 20 people in it, so
That many, okay, that's.
it's the cast is so big.
But I would imagine, I mean, when it comes to managing all those actors, for example, and directing them, I, I would imagine that your video game experience has sort of helped with that. As in that
Yes,
you really got to direct lots of people.
yes, I mean, Vernon and I together direct all the actors for Talos Principle and Serious Sam, and I've also done directing on other gigs that I've worked on with Ace Team and stuff. So that helped tremendously, and that in fact made it possible. I wouldn't have been capable of doing Gospels of the Flood without having the connections that I got via doing video games. So I knew people at companies, and I could reach out to them, and then they could reach out to someone like Peter Wingfield for me, and kind of make all of that work. So video games have been very, very useful in that regard, and we've, I think, encountered a lot of amazing actors who are really underappreciated. There are so many incredible voice performers in video games, like also Aaron, who plays Athena, and Alexander Drennan, who's just incredible.
Okay, and with that, I have to ask you, when was the first time that you both like directed something together, as probably in a video game?
Oh, university?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Jonas was like 21. He was so cute
Can you
and
stop that,
innocent.
please? With age is the thing.
So in the 7th century,
Yeah.
5 years ago, good.
when we went to university, yeah, that's how we met. We wrote and directed stuff together.
Yeah. Very serious theater. It was
Yeah.
a Christmas pantomime.
Okay, because for a moment there you shocked me. I mean, I was trying to think of you actually trying to do something, with a very straight face on. And
No. The theater group we were in was like divided into these two main branches, and like half of them did like, oh, we're doing Shakespeare and we're doing 12 Angry Men and whatnot, and Jonas and I were just like Christmas pantomimes, cross-dressing, yay.
yes, this feels right, actually.
Uh-huh.
I did Shakespeare. You did Shakespeare, but always
Yeah,
playing the
under
dumb
duress.
I always played the stupid comedy side characters.
Fantastic. But now, before I go on with other questions, let me ask you something that comes from the chat, and Gordita asks that, and the question is whether you can help people understand the inclusion of Tennyson's Ulysses in Road to Gehenna and Talos 2, and what does the reference to A Child's teach us about the Talos Principle?
Um. Uh. Okay, that's difficult.
Okay, I'll give
No,
you
no,
like
no, no.
15
Let me
minutes.
think. I mean, look, the poem resonates very deeply with me, and it resonates, I think, very deeply with the story itself, because it's about, continuing and going forth even when you are not what you once were, which is true of the characters. It's true of humanity in the context of Talos, and it has this, this notion of not yielding, which I think is the core, really. Now the Achilles line, I don't think um, I can say that has a specific point of reference, but for some reason it's a line that I find incredibly moving. There's something incredibly nostalgic and sad and about kind of having known someone, great, which also I think resonates very much in Talos 2, with the idea of these lost individuals and people who had died and long before the story began. And so there is a way in which, for me, it kind of echoes, but I couldn't say, oh, this is, that. Yeah. It doesn't like, you know, it, a lot of things kind of echo in a meaningful way without being necessarily, oh, this stands for that, right? This character is that character. It's more that it has this thematic resonance,
Mhm.
that makes it moving and powerful to us, and then hopefully also to players. I think that's the best way I can put it there.
Anything to add here, Verena?
No, sadly, the rule of thumb is if there's some classical writing included in Talos, then Jonas picked that, and usually not me. But I'm
Okay.
just saying it
No,
as
no,
it
fair,
is.
fair, fair. You do a lot more character work, and I do a lot more of
Yeah,
that.
And
plagiarism.
no, that's an interesting question. Now, I mean, how do you actually work together? I mean, how does one collaboratively author something as complex and as, quite frankly, vast as the Talos Principle, or the Talos Principle II, for example?
With great difficulty. I mean, I don't know. It's not easy. I mean, Verna, you talk about it. I don't know.
It's not easy, so I'll have my wife talk about it. Um,
That sounds.
anyway, yeah. As a rule of thumb, if there's dialogue, then me and Jonas probably sat together in a room and hashed out who says what and when, and that's a very improvisational type of writing. Like somebody will say, and then he says, I like cornflakes, and the next person will say, oh, but then the reply has to be this, and so we'll just build literally just build the dialogue by speaking it ourselves to each other. And if there's a longer chunk of text than usual, we'll talk in the morning about, today I should go off and write the letters from Hypatia to Sarabai, and then we'll wander off and write those, and then in the evening come back and compare notes and improve upon each other's writing. I mean, usually I'm just
Okay.
like, no, that's very good, and
So it's like there's like a lot of discussion going on between you, and like,
Yeah. And
yeah.
yeah, exactly, in that process. Either it's written together if it's any kind of dialogue, or it's written separately and then revised together after the fact. when it's something more long form or just more like a static piece of text.
Yeah.
What's difficult is that, I mean, I on Talos 2 am credited as lead writer, and it is I came up with the story for these games, so it's difficult because you need someone who will make a decision at some point. But of course, in a relationship, you're both equal, so there's an inequality there that can become frustrating, because if you disagree very intensely about something, then that can become quite difficult sometimes. I think it's fair to say, right? Like we've had fights about
Yeah.
this where we got really angry at each other,
We got
and
really angry, like for example about come on, what's the old guy's name?
Alcatraz.
What?
About Alcatraz.
Alcatraz, yeah,
Yeah,
oh God,
character
the
in
the
Talos
battle
2, where
raged for days.
we got really angry at each other because we had different visions of the character, and in the end, Verna was right about that, and we went with her version of the character much more so than with mine. But still, there are cases where I have to kind of make a decision at some point because that is just the job, right? Like I'm kind of the also when it comes to working with Tom Joubert, like there's still someone who has to be on top of all this. I'm also the person that the problems come to, right? I'm the problem. I'm the I'm the person who's kind of then the one that others will talk to or whatever, and assign tasks to and whatever. So I'm kind of the focal point, which is both helpful in some ways, but then also challenging in other ways.
But he does that very well. Like we've had a project which I won't name, where literally not just the writers but the entire team would just like hide behind Jonas, like hide under his skirts and go like, can Daddy writer, can you please talk to the bosses because we're unhappy about this? And then Jonas would go like, of course. So he does the whole lead writer thing very well.
Yeah, it's also a slightly managerial thing, right?
Yeah.
And besides the creative control, it's also getting to express everyone else who's working on the writing of a game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's necessary, not enjoyable exactly, but someone has to do that job, because we'll never. I mean, we have three writers on a game like Talos, where we all have different visions, different ideas. It all has to be united into one project at the very end, and we're very different, which is also part of our strength, I think, as a team. Like also with Tom, like the difference between us ends up creating and being synthesized into something interesting and complex, but complicated. But it's yeah, it can be a rough part of the job sometimes.
And do you, I mean, before you actually start fleshing out characters or obviously dialogue, etc., do you have like this central idea, this core axis, like this essence of the story, or is it this something that also evolves while you're writing, while you're doing the thing?
I would say we have the essence of what the story is. I don't think we've ever, right? I don't think we've ever pitched something where we didn't know what the
No,
overall themes were.
it does evolve sometimes. Like I remember with Talos too, there were a couple of things that we wanted to go into, and then and topics that are very dear to our heart, but then at the end there wasn't any space for them, so we, sadly abandoned them, and but we had some other ideas. So there's always an evolution happening, but in general, I think you need to know your themes and where you're going in order to write something, because you want to like layer in the seeds from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Can you give us any examples of things that were actually cut or never made it? I mean, non-shocking PG examples of things that never made it into the game.
No, just I'm a big fan. We're both big fans of Ian Banks's culture books, and there's one of the discussions that happens in there was if you copy an AI, is the copy a copy, or can it be an independent being of its, on its own? And we had this idea of going into that as a topic, but that just would have been this giant discussion. So we were like, no, sorry, there's no space for it.
You might see that in Talos 3 one day a little bit somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think we had yeah, we had some stuff about the idea of resetting someone as well, of like because they're robots. Like, what if someone's damaged and they're behaving weirdly, and you need to decide whether or not to set them back to an older save point, so to speak, and erase everything they've become. And what are the ethics of that? Are you saving them? Are you making a choice that's unfair to them? Are they? Uh, and that was going to be a discussion at one point, but it was just there was no space for it. It was impossible.
Okay, fair enough. But okay, that's a very good example of something interesting that never managed to quite make it into the game. On the other hand, you did have, stuff that was quite unexpected, such the Talos One Museum, the Dead Cats shrine thing. All those things. They were writing decisions, right? To include
Yeah,
those
yeah, that
things.
was all writing decisions that came from. We have very extensive regular meetings between the writing team and design and basically the people in charge. And there were very, 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 very extensive discussions during the creation of Talos 2. So yeah, a lot of stuff like that came from, well, what does the story need there? So and there were suggestions, I mean, that came from the others in the team as well, right? Like, how about we do this and so on. So but through those discussions, through story discussions, yeah, we came up with stuff like the memorial and the museum and the archaeological exhibition
Mhm.
and all of that stuff.
Well, I don't know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, but I do get the sense that Talos 2 was a more narratively driven and focused game than the original. I mean, it feels as if the writing itself was more central to everything that happened and every decision that helped shape the game itself.
That's true, and but it's in two ways, I think. One is obviously we came in from the beginning,
Hmm.
um, because with Talos One we came in, not like some people imagine 5 minutes before the end, but we did come in, a year before it was released or something, and there was a lot already there, and it was a lot about making sense of what was there and building something inside of that. But at the same time, it's also because it's a sequel. And what was very important, I mean, first of all, because the sequel and we were already there, so we were there from the beginning because we were just already there as part of the company. Um, but also, it was very important for Talos, in my view, to pay off the promise of the original game. The original game is about bringing back humanity from the dead, and there's a huge tendency in storytelling nowadays when you do a sequel to just reiterate the first one, just reset everyone. If there's a couple, break them up and then they fall in love again, or just everything just goes back to before, which I don't know, maybe that's a reflection of where we are, kind of, where we've been stuck politically and historically for the last few decades, where everything just goes in
Hmm.
an infinite loop. And um, so we wanted very specifically to avoid that. We wanted to say, look, the storytelling in Talos One was something that we did take very seriously, right? Like, the philosophy stuff and the story wasn't something that was just slapped on and whatever. It was meant as a serious work of science fiction. So if you do a sequel, well, now you've created humanity, and just for it to be a meaningful story, it has to pay off the first one. So now you have to have this bigger setting. And if there's other people, then the storytelling is going to be very different, because now you have to interact with other people. And thematically, it was also about that, because the first game is really about the self, and then the second is about the self in context of humanity and about society and how we interact with other people. And so that just required a different kind of storytelling, where other characters were really in your face, and you couldn't avoid them, because, well, one of the main themes of the game really is that even when you try to avoid humanity, you can't. There is no outside the system. There is no fleeing from the kind of world that we're in.
I actually love how political those games are. I mean, yes, they're definitely philosophical. Yes, they do grasp with some like some more general ideas and questions, but they're also like deeply political.
Yeah,
even if that's not instantly obvious, I would say.
they are. They're political in the sense that they deal with. They're not political in the sense that they necessarily take only one specific view and try to advocate for that in a kind of propagandistic way, but they just deal with history and philosophy and society and all of those things, and those are inherently political questions because they are the questions of how do we coexist, which is what politics is. Um, so yeah, in that sense, I think they're very very political games, but not in the kind of modern day we slap on some mottos kind of way, which is I think a different type of experience.
Okay, so I'll let you know that there's
We
this
have
reference in the chat that the copy of AI story angle has already been touched upon in Soma,
mm-hmm.
the horror game, but there's also the question of what role faith plays in the Talos story. And Gordita asks whether they're wrong or does the God particle appear at the end of Talos 2?
Okay. Let's do all of those. And first of all, actually, I saw and I looked at the chat. So,
Okay, and you can
Mr.
also
Bob
answer
five five
Alessandro's
five
thing
five,
too.
where does Frogs Are People 2 come from? That would be Tom Joubert. You'd have to ask him precisely where that came from, but I think it just comes from this discussion of where's the difference between a person and a thing and an animal, and so I think a frog was a good case for that. Maybe he picked it from something specific. I don't know about that. So that's definitely Tom Joubert there. Um, okay, more stuff here. What was the next one? Okay, the thing about Soma, yeah, Soma has a lot of parallels. It's kind of a darker take on the same themes um, as Talos. I obviously am more sympathetic to the ideas in Talos. I mean, even the word Soma shows up in the original Talos Principle. So it's funny we have and the creator of Soma is someone who also started doing indie games around the time that I did. So there's definitely some kind of parallels there between those uh, two games, with Talos just being the much more optimistic one. Okay, the role of faith. This is a complicated one. Vernon, do you want to say anything on that? Should I
What
do
about
the?
the role of faith? God, no.
Yeah. Um,
God no is a very excellently,
Yeah.
perfectly. That's an excellent choice of words, actually.
um, okay, so yeah, the first game is very much about doubt. It's very much about questioning rather the what you're presented with, right? It's about questioning this God narrative that you're given by Elohim. But of course, it's also still about faith in a way because it's about this idea of faith in civilization and humanity, which is expressed through Alexander Drennan. Um, and those kind of opposites there. You have this extremely doubting figure in Milton, the AI that's in the terminals, and then you have the never questioning anything Elohim, and then you have Alexander Drennan as a kind of example of something else. But then in Talos 2, I think faith becomes perhaps the most central theme, and the idea being, the question being that how do we find meaning? Because we do, I think, require faith in life, faith in something greater than ourselves. But the game suggests, at least as one of its answers, that that does not necessarily need to be faith in God. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that in order to be able to really live and for things to get better, you need faith in humanity and other people. But it discusses how difficult that is. I think you'll notice that some characters are quite annoying and some characters are not that likable here and there, and that's very deliberate because that's what human beings are like. And there's really good ones, and then there's kind of more annoying ones. And so a lot of it is about these ideas that Alexander Drennan presents, this universalism and humanism, and she presents them in the first game, and those are kind of what you're struggling to achieve. And then the second game is about, okay, try to make that actually work, right? It's about the difficulty of maintaining faith in the, let's say, project of the Enlightenment, in the sort of humanist vision, in the reality of a world that's kind of coming apart and where people increasingly don't believe in anything. So in that sense, the God particle, I mean, that term is a bit, used a bit confusingly in the media, so I wouldn't exactly identify it with that, but there's a connection in that we're talking about a theory of everything in that game. We're talking about understanding the fundamental properties of reality, of the cosmos, and gaining control. It's basically the end point of science. It's gaining control and understanding over nature. So the entire game really is structured around that because of what happens when you run out of mysteries. What happens when you do understand how things work, and where do you find meaning if you have gotten to that point where you can no longer say, oh, it was some other thing. It doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, we have a character in the DLC who is very religious and who actually sees God as in all things. So it's not necessarily an anti-religious perspective, but it's about the notion of when you do find the answers, what do you do with them?
Okay, and I have to ask you, is there also this subtle Promethean angle to everything that's happening in Talos 2?
I mean, Prometheus is like one of the main characters, and you free him in a very climactic scene. So it's
not very subtle.
It's very, very much a Promethean view of the world, and there are, of course, other ways you can go forward in the game, but certainly this kind of Promethean humanist view is really, really central.
Is it solarpunk though? I don't know what solarpunk is.
I'll be honest with you, and I will say no. To me, at least, a lot of what I've been exposed to in terms of solarpunk is very, we can live in accordance with nature, but kind of also use technology. So it's more nuclear punk. It's more, nope, we can take control and we can build big things, and we can, we can take control of the world and do it correctly, rather than this kind of, small is beautiful, degrowthy kind of view. Now, I'm sure not all solarpunk is that, and maybe I'm being unfair there. So, but it does actually, I would categorize it more in the kind of older Promethean kind of view of the world, than in the kind of more contemporary ones.
Good. And as everyone keeps mentioning Talos 3 and everything in the comments, I'll very quickly ask you about the remaster of Talos 1, which is it's called Talos Principle Reawakened. And as you mentioned before, Jonas, it's not just remaster, it's also an extension to the original game. And I don't know, were you both involved in writing the new bits?
Yeah.
Or adding to them?
Yeah, why don't you actually say something about that? It was your concept.
It was my concept. I'm not quite sure what I'm allowed to say without. We're still in spoiler territory, right? So
the main premise, just the main premise of the beginning, we have said that. So there is a new chapter.
There's a new chapter.
A new DLC, let's say.
Yes, exactly, with puzzles. I think there's 16 of them, 18 new puzzles. I'm not entirely sure actually, which are like bastard hard, and we were tasked to come up with a concept for it, and originally wanted to do something that's set in the same timeline as Talos Principle II, but then we decided that would just complicate everything way too much. So we decided to just go to the very beginning and tell a story that even predates Talos Principle 1. And I think that's, I mean, I don't really dare to say more.
Well, Gordita there in the chat mentions that Alexander Drennan's duality of strength and vulnerability deeply resonates with so many superfans. We hope for more of her in Talos 3. Now, in Talos 3, I can't promise much because she's dead. But in the beginning, we do get to basically spend a little bit of time with her while she's alive. And I think that does give you a different perspective on her.
Yeah, we wanted to show a different facet of her, because in Talos 1 we had these very considered diaries of hers, where or time capsules where she thought long and hard about what she wants the future humans to hear. And then in Talos 2, there's kind of more like what other people think she might have been like. Like it's all very deified. And then we thought, what is Alexandra Drennan actually like as a person?
Yeah, we've also seen it through Trevor's eyes, but here you just see
Yeah.
her like just in the moment, less considered. It's not like, oh my God, it's going to turn out that she's awful and
No,
actually
no, no,
she's
don't worry.
racist or something. No, she's still Alexandra Drennan, but you just see her kind of existing in her day-to-day life in a more down to earth kind of ordinary way, and you see her
Yeah.
interactions with other people. That it's a very intimate, small story. It's not, oh my God, there's a huge revelation about the simulation. It's much more a day in the life, just kind of seeing what people are like, just a character study.
And about Talos 3, I don't think I'm spoiling anything when I say that a long time ago we promised ourselves that whoever was starting this journey with us, so both in terms of the dev team and in terms of the voice actors, would also end it with us. So
Yeah, I mean, Aaron,
barring natural disasters, everybody is going to make a comeback.
yes, Aaron is going to be there for
Yeah.
sure, but Alexandra, we'll see. Right. Oh my
Okay,
God, there's still a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I know. So I'm thinking that we can cover some of those towards the end, especially the more general ones,
Yeah,
and
we're happy
perhaps
to keep answering questions. It's
yeah,
all good.
I'll let me be the master of ceremonies here.
No,
What I see it.
I'm the captain now.
Okay,
No,
fair enough. You
no,
won.
go ahead, go
That's right.
ahead,
No,
go ahead.
seriously, because I'd like to just cover some fundamental stuff, and I don't want things to take far too long. So I'll start with one of the questions that has to do with Series Psalm 4, which is something we haven't really discussed almost at all. And it's a very straightforward question. It's like regarding your work on Series Psalm 4, and which of its elements would you consider to be important for the future of the series? And whether there's anything you would actually change to.
Um, okay. I don't know what the future. Sorry, I keep playing with this thing. Don't you hate it when you just get like a
What is
nervous habit? I don't even know. It's some small little
what
brush
is
thing.
that thing? I
Why
love
is
that
that even
thing.
on my desk? I don't know.
Yeah, I have a pen. It makes more sense actually.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense. Anyway, so well, future Sam, which I think you mentioned is in the question, is obviously the most important part. It's what connects the stories back together. It was a hint at what we at the time anyway considered the future of Sam to be. I can't right now just make any kind of pronouncement about what is that's not something that I know.
I imagine it's more about
Uh,
what's in your heads. What do you feel would be
um,
important for
when we
the
were writing it at the time, certainly the glimpses you catch of the future, but also I would say simply the notion of Sam as a good person who cares about his friends and that he might, you get a very little glimpse there of Kenny in the future. So you get the idea that that Sam might tamper with events a little bit in a very serious Sam way. Now, is that going to be in a future game? I don't know. But that was certainly the intent to just give it a little bit of give Sam a bit of a human connection, and that maybe also plays into his future. In terms of changing, oh my God, I would change like a million things. Sam 4 was a very rough project. It I cannot and will not go into huge details of that. It's nothing like, oh my God, some person was horrible or something. It's not about any kind of individual conflicts. It was just a rough project for its own reasons. And there's a lot of compromises in it. There's a lot of things that aren't the way exactly that they should be. And I think if I could go back, I would probably cut quite a bit. I would move some things around. Um, just some things are not being used as they were initially intended to be used. Look, in video games, you often end up making insane compromises for budget reasons, development reasons. Something suddenly happens, and you're like, "Oh my God, what do we do?" Um, and that is a case where while I'm very proud of the game, and I think the game is very funny and clever, and it has quite a few layers to it that people don't really see, it is rough, and it's not exactly how we would do it. And I also think that our relationship with Crow Team has evolved a lot just as members of the team. So there would also just, if we were doing it now, there would also just be things where we would just do it differently because you are in a position, and we are now in a position where we can much more easily say, guys, how about we do it this way? And that might mean less storytelling in some cases. That might mean fewer lines in some cases, or it might mean collapsing certain things into other things. Um, I still think it's a pretty cool game, but yeah, it's not so much that I would like point out a specific detail of saying, oh, we wouldn't have had this character or something. Although some of the side mission NPCs, for example, would be simplified enormously in my view, because there are just problems with how some of this works. And yeah, but the only thing I can say beyond that is that I'm very sorry that there are aspects of Sam that are rough, but believe me, everyone in Crow Team worked like crazy to make that game work, and I'm actually kind of surprised it's as good as it is, because there were some moments that were very rough, but everyone really did a very good job pulling it together into, I think, a fun kind of pulpy adventure.
Yeah, but pulpy or not, I mean, I feel there are certain very obvious thematic ties to Talos Principle. Perhaps this humanism at its heart. It's there, and you can see the connections. You can understand that this is something that's written by you two, for example, for the most part at least, and it has some pulpy similarities to, say, the Talos Principle or the Lands of Dreams games. You can see that some of the core ideas are still there.
Yeah. Yes. I mean,
makes sense.
Verena, yeah.
As writers, we are interested in a certain set of ideas. Some writers will gravitate towards, nihilistic ideas, and we're just the opposite. So I think unless specifically tasked by powers that are greater than us to write something else, we'll probably always write something in that vein.
So, Verena, you do gravitate towards happy endings, and happy endings tend to be political in a way. I mean, they sort of come with this built-in optimism that also comes with a built-in political ideas, right?
Yes, I mean, I like a good story that makes you cry. I would say I don't so much gravitate towards happy endings, although happy endings are wonderful, than towards stories that believe in humanity and in the power of change. And that can still be a sad story. I mean, you can't say, we believe that humans are good and that humans can do good things, but it still goes wrong through things outside of our sphere of influence. But yeah, in general, yes, fair. I do believe in happy endings.
You do, Jonas?
I absolutely. I mean, you're right. Not necessarily a happy ending, but the idea of change
not a
being
silly
possible,
happy ending, but like
of success being possible, victory being possible, right?
Yeah.
If we're going to speak politically for a moment, one of the things I find most irritating about left-wing politics is people have fetishized heroic defeat for a very long time. And it's, if you go out in a blaze of glory, we tried. Who gives a shit that you tried? And I think there's a huge fetish for that, and so yeah, I do like to write stories that are about the possibility of doing something, even if it's very difficult and requires sacrifices. In the case of Sam, yeah, I mean, you're really not wrong. It is it's an extremely philosophical game in a way. I mean, it has a villain who speaks in a mishmash of like uh, end of history cliches and kind of Thatcherist things, and he's not explicitly right wing. He's more post political. He's an incarnation of the notion that you cannot do anything, of kind of postmodernism as a villain, and So it's not. I wouldn't say that the game is kind of explicitly left wing in any way, but it is explicitly kind of opposed to this post political moment that we were in, and this notion that um, individuals can't do anything, and that there is no point in trying this
Mm.
this postmodern helplessness, and it ties to ideas of the hero and all that. It has a lot in it, but it's expressed in this pulp narrative, which is also fun and joyful and has, I think, love for its stupid characters. So I'm very fond of those aspects of the game. I don't think that they get recognized simply because it's called Serious Sam 4. And like one thing about video games is that yeah, you have to get if you want people to take it seriously, you have to give it a dark title and then also tell everyone that it's very
Exactly. You have to
serious.
tell them that this is a serious game. Like,
Yeah,
take
I mean,
note.
if we didn't write the word philosophy on Talos Principle, I think it would have much more negative reviews, irrespectively of whether, even if it was exactly the same game. We're just somehow not conditioned to expect anything out of video games. People go in thinking there cannot be anything here of value very frequently, which is a shame, right? Because a lot of
So
interesting things
I have to
are done.
mention this excellent comment. This is a very valid point. It says that Serious Sam has serious in the title, and how can people think it's not a serious game?
Yeah,
Which is
yeah.
such a
I
fair
don't know.
question.
Yeah, very very good
It's
point. Very good
completely
point.
unfair. But seriously,
Um,
seeing all those questions, I'll just ask one last thing from me, and then we'll move on to answering like all those interesting questions. So my question is, how are things in the lands of Dream? And before you explicitly answer that, it's like, Verena, have you drawn anything Lands of Dream related in the past 5 or 10 years?
Yes.
Excellent.
um, yeah. I mean, I'm um in the final dying stages of finishing the next game, Council of Crows, which has been torture and a heavy burden on my back for many years. I think I
15.
have never in my life been late on any deadline, and with this one thing where I'm late by a decade,
Welcome to
which
my
is
world.
very very frustrating. It's almost done now. I have no idea whether I think it's good. It's not as good as People Claim Everything, but I think it's good. It's very dark, and people will be probably a bit confused by it,
Very
but
dark, you say.
it's very dark. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
used a lot of black.
No.
Okay. I mean, okay, good,
No,
good.
it's
It's got me worried for a
about
second.
war. It's about war. It was written years ago, but people will find some of it probably relevant to nowadays, even though that's not necessarily intentional as such. But it is a it has its bleak moments. I think it's good, but yeah, and I hope that soon ish. I mean, there's still bug fixes and things and whatnot to do, but soon it will become available along with the other games in a kind of package on Steam, probably for free, and you'll just be able to get the whole. What I want is the entire Lands of Dreams cycle in one place, where you can just look at it as a whole, basically.
Including the book.
No, not the book. I don't know
Yeah,
what
no.
they'll do with the children's
Yeah,
book. I have no idea.
I'll get to
Oh.
that. Yeah. Anyway, so I'll start going through some of the questions, like not in a thematic order or anything. So, Michael asks something that we've more or less answered before. Is like, when setting out to create an interactive narrative, how much of the story and the themes are nailed down before you set out to write the different nodes and branches, and whether you actually find out the story as you write it and as you explore different possibilities and this sort of thing.
I would say 98% is already there when you start. Like you need to know what you're doing. For me, so themes, the outline of the story, the events, characters might change. This character ends up doing this. This character ends up doing that. But what it is about, how it feels, those things are there from the beginning, and then you explore them, and maybe some unexpected things happen. But it's not like you just start writing and see what happens. I think you can do that with some things. You can do that with some stories. You can do that with some screenplays, maybe, where you just let the character surprise you. But with a video game, there's just so many elements, and there's such a big web of things that, to me, that's you need to know where you're going from the get-go.
Okay, and if we applied the same question to the Lands of Dream, where you have this, if I remember correctly, like this weird creative interplay where, like Verena draws something, you write something, then she draws again something else, and then Christos comes in and has some new
You need
music,
to know
and
the themes. You need to know the
you
themes. You
still
need to
have
know
like
the
those
story.
axes.
Yes, yes.
Good.
How it plays out can change during the writing. With the Lands of Dream games, they're so weird and unpredictable, and they are very, very, very strange. So things in the actual game can change in very unexpected ways as you're going, but the fundamental themes of the whole thing have to be there from day one so that you can structure it around that and make sure that everything makes sense. Just so
Okay,
you can find it. I mean, you have an infinity of possibilities, and you need to constrain yourself somehow anyway, right? You can't just make stuff. You need to know what you're making.
mm-hmm. And another question relatively similar is, how difficult is it to work with other people, other disciplines, let's say, in game development? And how do you reach compromises with design, with narrative, with art, with the technical teams?
It can be very difficult, and it can be very easy.
Yeah.
And it depends tremendously on the people and the culture of the company that you work at. So I think by now at Crow Team, we all have known each other for a very, very long time. There's not a company where people come and go a lot. So we've known a lot of the people there for over a decade now. So it has gotten increasingly easier. There are always conflicts, right? I mean, what
What?
you look like I'm saying something insane.
No, no, no. I was just thinking that as you said, that it's gotten easier working with Crow Team because we've worked with them for so long. So they kind of just know that we know what we're doing. So they're almost just like, you do your thing, writers, and we'll let you. Of course, a couple of weeks ago, our boss said, it's important that the characters are good. And I'm like, I hadn't thought of that.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, that was funny. But in general, at a company like Crow Team, mostly you get. I mean, like I said, there are cases where design can butt up against you, and you kind of have to find a compromise. But we tend to try and think in game design terms when we're writing the story to begin with. So we don't think of it as like a film that we're cramming in. So it comes with a lot of elements that are already very flexible, and it's already thought out in terms of what happens if you solve a puzzle, what happens if you defeat an enemy. Like it's thought out in those terms. So that does make it much more flexible. It makes it much more doable. Um, I've had experiences with other companies where it's very hard because, for example, there's very little communication with artists or people like that. So you're tasked with kind of creating the meaning of the experience, right? Like, oh, who are these people? What is this guy like? What is that guy like? And then you try to write something that's maybe more layered, more complicated, and then they go, oh, it's a space marine, and then you're just screwed.
Please
And
don't
if you ever
badmouth
see that
Space
in video
Marines.
games where there's a huge mismatch between kind of how something appears and then how it's written, that's very frequently just it. The truth is that at most companies, not all, I think writers are very, very, very low in the pecking order. Um, and there's a tendency for people to think anybody could write, and it's not really a proper job. So, and not at Crow Team, but it is I mean, I'm sure there are people who think that. There's people who think that everywhere in the industry, but in general, that's not how you get a game like Talos. But it happens, right? And then there's also other types of experiences. Like when I work with Ace Team, it's generally a very happy experience because they decide tons and tons of things, and I don't actually have to say I don't like determine a lot of stuff myself, but we kind of have the sense of what's cool and what isn't. So there's also not really much of a problem there. And then they trust me to do my part, and we get interesting, strange games. And every now and then we adjust something, so my stuff fits their stuff or their stuff fits my stuff. But because we have very similar kind of sense of what's interesting or aesthetic or whatever, there's not such a problem there that I've experienced a few other times, or that friends have experienced.
We're also, again, we're just incredibly lucky because Core Team is this mid-sized company, so we have enough of a budget to be able to say we have a wish list of things that we want in the game, and then there's a good chance that the design team will say, yeah, sure, you can have those. But we also don't have like a writer's room with 20 people in it where everything gets lost like in a committee of design, and so we can make our own decisions. So I think me and Jonas were just incredibly lucky, and I've from stories that I hear from other writers, I've become incredibly humble about that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Honestly, like a 20 people writing room does sound quite hellish. I mean, regardless of who those people might be. So anyway, more questions. Glenn, who is reminded of 80s Star Trek when it comes to Talos. And the main question is, how does the Talos series remain compelling drama in an optimistic utopia with a notable lack of mustache twirling villains and gunplay? As in, how do you make...
Hey there, Mike.
Sorry?
It's going.
Someone is not...
Yeah.
Someone is
now, luckily, I don't have anything too complicated for you. It's probably me just being a bit of a moron with Financial Force. I've got all the information I need
Someone
to
in a
basically
meeting?
make the...
I don't know. I was confused for a second. Anyway, I muted them. Anyway, so... Sorry. Yeah, the question is, how do you make a compelling drama in a society that more or less functions?
Okay.
Which I would answer.
We've talked about a lot.
You could start by answering that you play through Talos 2 and you probably get a good idea of how you do that. But...
Yeah, but look, you mentioned 80s Star Trek, and so I have very, 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 very lengthy opinions, which I'm not all going to share now, about TNG. But one of them is this classic story that the writers were initially very frustrated because Gene Roddenberry basically didn't want the characters to have flaws or conflicts. And then the writing only got good when like Michael Piller took over, and it became much more focused on personal drama, which in my view eventually led to every story being, oh, Geordie's great grandmother is sad, or something like that. It eventually kind of lost its way, but I think that there is plenty of stuff in life that is interesting, that is not suffering. There is plenty of struggle, plenty to think about, plenty to deal with. I don't think that if we lived in a utopia, all our lives would be boring. I think our lives would be interesting, because the way we interact with each other and what we think about the universe that we're all in, and yes, there is also some drama of like things that have gone wrong and dealing with things of the past, but I don't think that it has to be boring, because the universe is incredibly interesting and interactions between people are incredibly interesting. And I think it's a myth kind of perpetuated by writers that everything has to be kind of negative to be interesting. And if I have a criticism of early Star Trek, in a way, is I think they failed to take on the challenge. They failed to take on the challenge of writing something interesting, which isn't about kind of this conflict between characters. And I think that they should have tried. Now, I do think Roddenberry may have gone too far a little bit, but I think that instead of trying to cram kind of the kind of storytelling you got on other shows into Star Trek, they should have actually tried to rise to the challenge and go like, okay, what is interesting about these people who don't have these problems? I think you can still also do character work inside of that, because people are still different and they still disagree about things, and it doesn't have to be this kind of personal thing. And I think now we live in a culture where everything has kind of become the most extreme version of that, where every character is a teenager and you're watching like people who are supposed to be, grown people, on every TV show just immediately lose their shit whenever something happens and be like, "No, you said that. I'm so mad." Oh. And that's just everything now, because everyone has become infantilized. So, yeah, I think people can have sober and thoughtful interactions with the world without that being boring necessarily.
Would immortality be boring though?
No.
No,
Good.
no, it'd be fantastic. If the world is good, then continuing to exist in the world is good.
Good.
If life is valuable and good and enjoyable, then yes, why not?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't see an end to it.
I absolutely hate this. Immortality would be boring because I'm like, there's so many skills in the universe. So what? I've learned 100 languages. I can learn 101.
It's just, is life good? Is life interesting? Is life enjoyable? Is it something that's worth experiencing? Then yes, then it should. Basically, but you're saying my immortality would be boring. Is like saying, well, life is boring. Well, life isn't boring. Life is entirely too short because there's so much amazing stuff out there.
Exactly. Good. So I'll package a few questions that have to do with Talos 3, time frames and ideas. Anything? Is there anything vaguely, announceable, tellable, whatever that has to do with Talos 3? Like,
I mean,
not going to be 10 years.
It's not going to be 10 years. Can't say
it's
more.
It's going to be 12.
Yeah.
It's going to be 8.
It's going to be,
but it's not going to be 10.
It's going to be 50. Well, make it when we're 90. No. Look, we're just we really can't say right now. But it's something that's very much on our minds. I hope that Reawakened does well. That would be helpful. But yeah, it's definitely something that is very much that we're very much dedicated to, and it's not just a vague possibility, let's say.
Another question that has to do with Talos Principle: how does James Joyce's main theme of exploring stream of consciousness play into the Talos Principle, if it does, or in game writing in general? Do you do stream of conscious stuff?
I don't know. Do we? I mean, there's maybe a kind of a vague link there to the way that you, in some cases, hear characters' thoughts, like in Into the Abyss, for example. But I wouldn't say that it's specifically Joycean. Now, there is maybe a slight link to Talos 3, but
stop saying Talos 3.
But other than that, I can't say anything.
Okay, so instead of talking or saying anything that has to do with Talos 3, what are the odds of you ghostwriting Athena Reborn or any other Talos novelization?
I would love to. Please, somebody pay me.
How much? I mean, I can pay.
I don't know. I mean, you can't make any money with books, so I'm guessing like something around 10,000 euros.
I don't know. Athena Reborn is tough, to be honest, because you get all these bits and you'd have to arrange them. I mean, I kind of know how they go together, but I don't know. It would be very interesting to do other stuff in the world of Talos, and there's a very slight possibility of doing something small in that direction in the future. But yeah.
Verena give you a look at something.
But you know what it is?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's not talk about it.
Yeah, I know what it is. I just
that's very
how
much
daring of you to announce it.
No, it's not a big thing. It's just a small thing that might happen in the direction of Talos 3, but I don't know. But it's also okay to me because it doesn't need to be a giant franchise type thing. To me, it's this essentially trilogy of games that tells one complete story, and then that's it. Maybe we do little other things at some point, but to me, it's never been about infinitely going back to the well and doing more and more Talos forever.
Yeah, that was actually part of the appeal for us, that we can write a story that's actually going to be done.
Yeah, Yeah, it's frustrating with Sam.
Was it something that you had in your minds from the beginning? I mean, the
Um,
rough
I had
outline.
the idea for 2 and 3 towards the end of Talos 1. So before the first game was finished writing, I thought, okay, I think I know where I would take
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the story. So there are basically hints at it in Talos 1 and 2, just like there are hints at Talos 2 in Talos 1, right? There's a lot of foreshadowing. So the whole thing does kind of tie together somewhat well, I think. Um, so yeah, it comes from back in the day. Now the details change, obviously.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. And also, a very different type of question. Any advice for people starting out as writers in games or narrative designers or whatever?
Um,
Because Loretta is filling out the role of game writer in her in the studio and doesn't have the experience and sort of asks
it's
for any tips.
it's very, I don't know, because our pathway has been very random, and most people that I know, their path has been incredibly random into getting this. I mean, when I started out, you couldn't, like, there weren't openings for like game writer positions, right? It just wasn't a thing. Like
Mm.
some programmer did the writing or some designer. People didn't even think about that very much, and so so for us, it's been through making games ourselves and getting in that way. I still think that that's probably the best. So I think there are tools for doing interactive fiction of various sorts. If you can actually teach yourself how to properly make games with some, more advanced software, even better because people will look at it more. But you can definitely do stuff with the basic tools that exist for creating any kind of interactive fiction. I think that's very helpful. Also, just so that you learn how to do it. You need experience. It's not an easy thing to do, so you need to just do it and produce lots of stuff. And you need to have something you can show people, and so that they can go and play it and go, oh, this is well written. So for me, that was the Infinite Ocean game that I made
Mm.
400,000 years ago, and then I remade it as a
You were
Flash game.
18 or something, 20.
I was 19, yeah. And I remade that as a Flash game, and Tom played the Flash game. And then when Tom suggested to Crow Team that they should hire me, he gave them that game, and they could go and they could play it, and they did, and then they liked it. And so they had an immediate kind of point of reference. Is this guy good at writing about AI? Yes, he is. He wrote an entire game about AI. Okay, we like it. Good, get him. So that was that. And in Verena's case, it was actually that she wrote a draft of Serious Sam 4 after my first draft wasn't that great, and she wrote her own draft, and we showed them that. And that was, again, it's something, but that's a different. You're not going to get that opportunity. But
Yeah.
the important thing is to have something to show where you can actually show someone, here's my writing, I am good at this. And the other thing is to just get the experience by just actually writing stuff, so that and not just short stories. Ideally, you should really write in the medium that you're aiming to get a job in, because it's not the same skill set. There is an overlap, but it's not the same skill set, and you do want the interactive element to be in there. You need to practice that. You need to develop your own thoughts about it, understand how it works structurally, and
Yeah.
all that.
And additionally, because I just saw the new comment about that. Coming back to the I'm a writer who works in video games, not a video game writer thing, I think it's very important that you take it seriously and that you don't fall into this trap of, oh, it's only a video game. And additionally, also that you never, ever, ever think, oh, they're only video game players. So we very often have conversations like, but will the player understand this? Do we have to explain this more? And I mean, obviously, you have to write a story that's like understandable, but just don't pre-chew everything just because it's only a video game.
Yeah, there are people. I've heard some shocking things from people
Yeah.
sometimes, on how they kind of devalue the thing, and they're like, oh, it doesn't need to be well written, it's a video game. And yeah, don't do that. Not if you want to produce something good.
And question, you'd say that we can trust the audience, generally speaking, or at least a sizable chunk of the audience to
Look,
understand
because I
what
said that
complex it is?
sarcastic thing. I said that sarcastic thing earlier about people not parsing video games and not
No,
understanding.
that's
So
yeah.
it's
Besides,
it's look, that's a general problem, right? And I don't have contempt for people. I mean,
yeah,
people are media illiterate. Very many people are very media illiterate. They have trouble understanding a story because we live in a culture that just tries to make you as stupid as possible so that you're obedient. So I don't blame people for this. If all you're ever exposed to is garbage, then you're of course not necessarily going to have the faculty sometimes. Even with something straightforward, like, and I think the internet is making that unfortunately worse in a lot of ways. So, but the other side of it is that just because it's gaming doesn't mean that everybody's stupid. That's the other kind of, unpleasant thing that people sometimes do, where they have this contempt for gamers who are so terrible. There's a lot of different people who play games, and and people engage with stuff, and they do. You should, I think you should trust them because you don't have another alternative. I think talking down to people is always bullshit. So it's better that you do something that doesn't talk down to them, and then if some people don't get it, they don't get it, and that's not necessarily because they're evil. Maybe it's because you did something wrong. Maybe it's because it's just not how they're used to engaging with video games. But yeah, better take it seriously and take people seriously, and then just kind of hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Talos Principle, we've been very pleasantly surprised to the degree, as to the degree to which players are willing to engage with complicated thoughts. And there's a discussion here to be had about how Talos Principle 2 was marketed versus how Serious Sam 4 was marketed, like about building expectations in the player, and then the player also, in response, kicks it up a notch in how they engage with the story. But yeah, I think when I edit other people's work or my own, the sentence that I say that the most is, I think that's implied, cut it, and I think that usually makes for better, leaner writing. So yeah, again, just don't spell everything out.
fair enough. And now, I have provided, Jonas, you don't mind, because this is a question for you. I will read Pika Commando's question to you, which is the following. I once read a post on your blog about how the writing in pop culture media, namely the MCU films, have become afraid of sincerity. They have become reliant on self-aware humor as a crutch, to absolve themselves of criticism, such as by characters pointing out the tropes and cliches it uses, or the silliness of the character situation to seem, above the cliches and, uses the silliness of the character situation to seem above the cliches and silliness despite playing them straight. I agreed very much with the sentiment. However, when Serious Sam 4 was finally out, I found the game's writing to be unfortunately guilty of this insincerity. You're being accused, man. As well.
Mm-hmm.
Serious Sam's writing finds itself trying to be like a B movie rather than actually be one, whereas characters in actual B movies say their cheesy one liners in utmost sincerity without saying it as a joke. Characters in Serious Sam 4 are, too self aware in their conversations. And okay, I think this is the main idea. It's like, were you doing this horrible crime in Serious Sam 4 or not?
I don't agree. Sorry, I just don't. Like, I just think the premise is wrong. Like, I don't think it's insincere at all. Like, it is a B movie. Yes, it is B movie humor, and there is an element of self-awareness, but there's no element of irony. It's delighted by the B movie language. It is completely in love with the silliness of its own verbal humor, and the characters are in love with their own verbal humor. So there's a huge difference between that. It's not looking down at it. There's no insincerity there. Yes, it is more playful than some B movies, but that's also plenty of exploitation movies and B movies and whatnot have a level of self awareness. They are clever. They are funny. They know they're being funny. I mean, I think people think B movie and they only think of like the worst of the worst or something, some, I don't know, shitty Reb Brown movie, and that's all they can imagine. But there's plenty of really funnily written, clever exploitation movies and other movies in that kind of direction, from the 70s and so on, that delight in their silly humor. And the people playing that, they knew that that was the case. They were enjoying it. And I think that's very much where Serious Sam 4 comes from. It comes from exactly that. It is sincerely in love with that kind of verbal humor, and it's playing with that. But it is not insincere in its characters. It's not in it. It has love for its characters, love for the kind of thing that they represent, which is then mirrored in the villain, who is explicitly someone who despises them for being what they are. But it's not insincere, and I'm sorry. I don't buy this premise. I get that people don't like it. I get that people wanted something else, and that's fair. That's perfectly fair. Some people love it, but I get that some people don't like it. But I just don't think that that sort of insincerity, or I think a thing has happened, which is that people saw everybody doing Joss Whedon writing in the Marvel movies, and now every time a character opens up their mouth and says a joke, it's Marvel. Everything is just, oh my god, it's banter, as if banter was like not what characters have been doing in every type of storytelling going back to like the Odyssey. Like it's just I'm sorry, I can't relate to that particular way of thinking, because to me this type of humor has always been part of this kind of storytelling. And I think people wanted something. I mean, some people clearly wanted something else, something less verbally dexterous, something more just, straightforward, quasi, Arnold Schwarzenegger ripoff movie. But I don't know. I wouldn't have found that terribly appealing. Going forward, like I said, I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea what that would look like. I would certainly reduce not the style of writing or anything, but I would reduce the frequency of character interactions and things like that, which are not really the way that they were intended in some cases. But to me, there is no difference. Like I don't see why you would write something that doesn't take joy in language and in character interaction.
Yep, that was a very definitive answer. Thanks. So
It's okay. I mean, people dislike
no,
stuff. It
no,
happens.
I get that. I get that. But it's I think that you answered to the core of this thing. It's like this is not an insincere Marvel-like attempt at mocking what I'm doing.
No,
It's
no,
the
yeah,
opposite,
no,
exactly.
no. It's written from a place of absolute love for this kind of thing.
Yeah. And also very quick through the other questions. I mean, Johannes is asking whether you are aiming to revisit something like the single claim everything in Style or Spirit, which we sort of mentioned before. It's the new game, the Council of Crows, which will eventually happen after it kills you both. And then Francesco noticed the books on yourself, and he's wondering whether you could probably suggest things that have been invaluable to you. Um,
In terms of writing, or sorry, what is the question?
Wait,
Books
I
that
noticed the books on Jonas yourself. I'm curious if you might elaborate on what books you know of and have been invaluable to you that come at things from a cerebral academic avenue. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, this media is often considered lowbrow. And one book I found was Archaeogaming by Andrew Reinhardt, in which philosophers like Foucault are used. Are you familiar with his work? Did it go into informing creating the Talos Principle? Sorry, I didn't edit
okay?
anything.
So, it's hard to say what's valuable in terms of. I mean, the stuff that is, I think, to me most influential is literary stuff. It's just novels that I love, stories that I love.
Mm.
Um, obviously, a lot of Greek mythology is very was very heavily influential on me from childhood onwards. The Odyssey is a big one. Um, Tolkien is a very big influence for me. And when it comes to, even though it expresses a philosophy that, in terms of politics, is the exact opposite. But his essays in what is it, The Monsters and the Critics, or The Monster and the Critic? I can't remember the title right now. On Fairy Stories is
Mm-hmm.
the big essay, right? Um, those are to me like they express some very profound ideas about how fiction works that have been terribly influential for me, like hugely influential. Philosophically, obviously come from a Marxist tradition, so it's the ideas of historical materialism that are the most influential for me, and I think there's tremendous humanity to be found in that, because it allows you to look at events from a more distant perspective rather than blaming individuals and seeing evil people everywhere. I think it's the traditions that are not focused on individual morality or ethics, but on understanding things at a more abstract scale, and how we are determined by the systems around us that I think give us access to first of all, understanding of how the world works, but also just a more sympathetic view of human individuals that are, trapped in this kind of historical moment and are determined by it, but are not necessarily, evil because they happen to have been born into this one particular function in society. And it maybe gives us a bit of humility about ourselves as well, and that we are also kind of the product of conditions, and we would have been totally different potentially under different conditions.
True. And speaking of books, Verena, any suggestions by yourself?
Excuse me, I didn't catch that.
I mean, if you have any influential books on your work that you would like to share.
Oh God. I mean, oh God, I hate questions like that. I've read a lot of sci-fi and a lot of fantasy and science fiction. I unapologetically like those books. I'm a huge fan of the works of Ian Banks, as I've mentioned before. God, what sounds intelligent?
Peter S. Beagle.
Peter S. Beagle, that's my favorite author in the whole wide world. I would recommend for everybody to read his works, and Lucius Shepard, I really, really enjoy. And I'm just like completely blanking right now. Yes. I read books, I swear to God, I know words.
Yeah,
and I read them a lot.
Okay, awesome. So I think we've covered a lot of ground, including Verena's favorite books. And I was thinking, that since people asked Jonas about his book due to the fact that it has like book in his backgrounds, maybe we could ask you stuff about stairs. Like, what can you tell us about stairs? Like, you have a stair behind you. What's your favorite?
Yes, these are stairs behind me, and they are, I kid you not, the most commented on feature of my life in Zoom calls. Like, nobody is ever like, "Oh, Verena, you broke your arm. Do you want to talk about that?" "Oh, Verena, you got your hair cut." It's always like stairs. So
they're emphatic.
Yeah,
they really are.
They're beautiful stairs. They remind me of the fact that I did study architecture and never obtained a degree. So they're basically mocking me every day of my life, cruelly. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So while we give people a last chance to think of any question and formulate it in as few words as possible. So again, I'd love to thank you so much for being here and ask, is that wine?
No, I'm sorry. So
I was about to get jealous. Sorry.
No, it's I swear to God, it's
okay.
Pepsi. Okay. I wish it was wine.
Yes, I it actually gave me this instant craving. But thankfully, no. Good. So again, thanks so much for being here, and thanks so much to everyone who asked us cool stuff and stayed here for quite some time. As for the recording, it's going it has to be edited and then uploaded at the D6 Learning YouTube account. Eventually, this is the best I can say for now. And again, think of any other questions, and while you do that, hello again, George.
Hello. I'll be posting now in the chat some useful links, both for D6 Learning, as well as some upcoming events that we're planning, mainly educational events. and some links that have been posted before, of course. But it's very good to have some Steam links for the Talos Principle Reawakened, the Talos Principle 2, and Serious Sam 4 as well.
Oh, there's another
So,
question there.
Yes.
right.
Okay, so
Well, George,
dialogues with
yes.
Serious Sam in Tormental, I don't know. Honestly, I would assume it's not canon, but I don't know. We
It,
were only sort of half involved with that game. And I can't even tell you what's in the final version right now. So I would tend to assume that it's not canonical. I wish, in all honesty, there was some sort of much clearer idea of what is the canon of Serious Sam, but that's not really something that exists. And if it wasn't up to me, I would probably try to cohere things a little bit more. But it is currently as it is, unclear. Will have to be determined at some point in the future. What opportunities are there for game critics who wish to write academically on them as to how can game critics that want to tackle games academically get involved specifically with more indie devs? I don't know. I think that's up to academics. I mean, my experiences. I spoke recently at an academic event about this, and my point to them was that I think I'm not super pleased with what I've seen, honestly, of academic work about video games, because it tends to not take the intent of the creators very seriously. It tends to approach games more as a way to get some funding to do some digital humanity stuff than an actual engagement with games as an artistic format. But I don't know. Opportunities exist as far as I can tell, but I think you have to. The world of academia is very cutthroat, so I think you have to just kind of pursue it and find things you like and take them seriously and then write about them and manage to get that published. And maybe you'll make a little bit of a difference to how this kind of thing is perceived, because I think a lot of it is a lot of stuff that gets published about video games is deeply unserious.
True. Though I would argue that we could use like quality critical tests. I mean, I'm thinking of stuff uh, like the articles by Alex Kazuan, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has some insights that I imagine would be very useful for a variety of creators. It's not just an attempt to show off how much they know or how funny they are, or treat a game as a product that has to be like objectively rated. It's a type of writing that has stuff to offer. Anyway, let's not.
There was one more question
There
that we
too.
missed, or yeah, okay.
Wait. The game Stray is a sequel to Talos One. That's a fun theory.
It's
Pro Team had that theory too.
Okay.
yeah, we have more dead cats.
Yeah.
Okay.
We joked about that as well. So I see here, video game is a side project while doing college study thing. Although I want to bring it to the quality point that commercially available, and as indie developer, I have the following question. What was the point you really had to make sacrifice to reach project to get a project to completion? And on the other hand, what was the commitment point you refused to sacrifice at any cost? So I've worked myself to death on some projects. I'm a bit fat, as you can tell. I gained a lot of weight, mainly on 2 projects. A lot of weight, because I was working so many hours. I was working so many hours, and at some point, your brain will not work anymore, and then you just put in sugar to work. And I was working like 16 hours a day at some point on certain games. And that's something I'm not going to do again because it's not worth it. Ironically, all the games where I really destroyed myself were games that aren't that good in the end. they're not as good as I would like them to be, not because of anything on my side. I did what I ultimately had to do in order to get them done, but the overall project wasn't worth it. And so to me, the answer is much more, don't do that. Yeah. I mean, I've worked hard on other stuff. I worked crazy hours before to SQL claim everything was very, very stressful near the end. But largely it's not worth it. It's just you put yourself through that and you don't really get anything for it. So yes, you have to work hard. I do think that that's an ethos you need to have if you're going to succeed as a writer. You do need to sit down and work and to take your work very seriously, to read, to prepare yourself for what you're doing, to know what you're talking about. But I don't think that physically destroying yourself is worth it. And when the industry demands that of people, they should tell the industry to go fuck itself.
And
Go
on
on.
another note, because we get this question a lot, and not only about video games, but just the other day I was talking to somebody who wanted to be a novelist, and they were also like, oh, I want to quit my job and publish my book. And I would just really caution people to throw their all into this and then expect to be able to live off the first title that they publish, because I mean, in any creative field really. So what Jonas and I did, we always had one of us working in the beginning and the other one working on creative projects, because just be very, very careful how much of yourself and how much of your security you put into this. I cannot stress this enough. It obviously not everybody has the luxury of a working spouse, but make sure that you, as cutthroat and Debbie Downer this may sound, just don't give it your all. Have a plan B, have a reserve.
Yeah, it's tricky because by nature, anybody who wants to be a writer is someone who will either write or die. But at the same time, you have to consider the practicalities. You have to have a way of living, and very frequently you don't. Especially if you come from a more working class background, it is rough if you don't have, and you will be competing with people who, in many cases, mommy's paying for everything or daddy's paying for everything, and so you do need to be aware that there's just a material side to things, and sometimes you can, just push through that when you're 20, but you can't push through it when you're 40. You can do the long nights and the this and the that and the working crazy hours when you're very young, but it does become a lot harder. And it takes a huge toll. So there is, you have to somehow balance somewhere the ambition that you have to do this with the practical side that you have to be alive to do it.
Yeah. Of course, everybody listening to this is beautiful and young and can work long nights and then still have a day job and also go to university. So what am I saying?
Everyone who is listening to this and to everyone who is actually actively talking also.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I can barely speak anymore, but yeah, but still. So yes, I think that we can stop with the questions. I mean, we've been here for roughly 2 hours. I don't want to exhaust you. I don't want you to die. Not quite yet, at least. There's things to do. Try not to die at all, which is good. And Yanis, yes, we are all very young, and the answers were excellent, and the questions were very interesting too. So thank you all for that. Again, and I would say we can, bid everyone good night and thank them, and thank you to again, and thank you to George. I'm in a very thankful mood, and the Superfan community is also very happy, according to Gordita. And I would say good night, everyone. It was
good night,
lovely
guys.
having
Thank
you
you
here.
Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Jonas. Thank you, Verena. Thank you, Konstantinos.
Finally.
Someone had to say that.
All right, thanks.